Chapter 8. I had planned to go out again the next day, even though I was afraid to push my luck. Still, there was always a chance I'd find my food left behind in some apartment. At least I'd hope so. I was on my way out when I heard shots and the sound of a car. It was definitely coming from the ghetto and not from the poor side. I decided to stay in the cellar. I sat near the opening and tried hard to listen. I heard shouts far away, then silence. It went on like that all morning. A house-to-house search. My turn came in the afternoon. I waited to see them enter the building and then retreated deeper into the cellar. It was clear to me now why Borak had always said that a hideout without a second exit wasn't worth a damn. There were German soldiers and Polish policemen. I thought I saw a Jewish policeman too. The soldiers had some kind of strange instruments. After a while I heard them knocking and tapping. They must have been looking for bunkers. They came to the entrance to the cellar and we stopped to examine it. One of them said in German, "We should have widen this hole and look inside." "No one could possibly get through there," said someone else. I heard scraping noises and laughter. I peeked out of my storage room and saw someone trying to squeeze inside. It must have made the others laugh, because he could hardly get his booted foot through the hole. Then I heard them searching outside the building, and finally they left. I stayed where I was until evening, but I knew now that my hideout wasn't good enough. And then, for the first time, I began to think of the broken third floor that hung out over the ruins at the back of the building. It would have been perfect if only I knew how to fly. The best thing about it was that it was protected on all sides. No one could see onto it, neither from inside the house nor from any of the other houses on the street, unless, that is, I were to look out the window, in which case I could be seen from the poor side. If there was really a larder up there, like the one whose remains we had found on the second floor, I could keep snow and my things in it. And if I could manage to get up on the fourth floor, I'd have myself a duplex apartment. Only what would I do for an emergency exit? I couldn't jump to the street from the high up, but I could lower myself by a rope. I started to think about ropes. Why? I was an expert on them. That's when I had the idea of a rope ladder. I could pull it up after me and no one would know I was there. How could anyone be on the floor of a ruins that couldn't be reached? The one problem was getting up there for the first time to make the rope ladder fast. I would have to build a wooden ladder first, a very high one. I doubted that I could find boards long enough for it, but I could nail shorter ones together. It would only have to hold me once, but I would have to build it outside the cellar, since it wouldn't fit through the opening, and that wasn't so simple. The hammering would be heard. Someone would come investigate. At night, it might even be heard on the poor side, maybe during the day, too. No, it was a rotten plan. I knew lots of fairy tales about animals and people. Usually the person was a prince or a poor farmer lad who had only once done a favor to a bee or a fish and was then in return helped by it to get out of some fix. Like to find the keys to a castle that had fallen to the bottom of the sea. But no matter how hard I stared at the birds that flapped above the fourth floor, I couldn't think of any favor I might do them. And even if I thought of one, what could they do for me? I ate and lay down to sleep. I must have tossed and turned a long time before I dozed off. In the middle of the night? No. It was already toward morning. I dreamed that I was angry at the birds for waking me so early every day. And in my dream I picked up a rock and threw it at them, over and over again. One rock flew through the window and landed on the poor side, where it hit the bully who used to stone us before the transports began. He started to scream like a frightened woman, and I awoke. Someone really was screaming. It was a woman in the street, not on the poor side though, on ours. She was screaming not far from me, although the sound kept fading more and more. Now I knew how to get the rope ladder up to the third floor. It would be a cinch. Sometimes, when I had trouble solving some riddle or problem in arithmetic, Father used to say, "Why don't you sleep on it, son?" And only if I did and still didn't know the answer in the morning would he agree to help me. I had my plan. I would go to the rope factory, even though it was 3 long blocks away. If I wanted to make an honest hideout, I had to take the risk. I would bring rope, find tools in some apartment, and saw wood for the ladder rungs. Short boards could be found, and I'd saw them deeper in the cellar. If I could hear nothing from there, no one would hear me either. Just to be on the safe side, though, I'd work by day when the noise from the Polish street drowned other sounds out. Besides, heavy rope for the ladder. I'd need a long piece of thin rope too. I'd tie one end of it to a rock and throw it through the third-floor window. I might not succeed at first, but sooner or later I was sure to. Not during the day. I'd do it at night, and when no one on the Polish side would notice a rock flying suddenly through an empty window and descending slowly along the wall of a house with a long rope dragging behind it. The rock would pull the rope after it. I'd wait for it to drop past the second-floor window, from which I'd reach out and grab it. Then I'd tie the rope ladder to the rope's other end and haul it in the rock until the ladder was hoisted to the third floor. After that, I'd make the rock end fast and climb up. Suppose, though, that was there a guard in the rope factory. I'd just have to take a chance. I explained to Snow, while I fed him some cracker crumbs spread with chicken fat from the jar. I petted his white fur gently and told him my plan. Then I put him back in the box, took the pistol, and slipped into the house next door. The first thing I did was go through all the apartments again in search of tools. Almost at once I found a case with a red cross on its lid, but it had only bandages and medicine. In the end, I found a small workroom with what I was looking for. I took a saw and a few other tools that perhaps I would need some other day, left them in a hidden corner of the staircase, and continued on my way. But now I felt sure of myself as far as the corner house, and I moved quickly and even carelessly, not stopping even once to listen, until I reached the loft where I had found and lost the food. Even before I heard the scream, I had a feeling that something was wrong. Perhaps I'd heard noises without being aware of them. "Papa?" shouted a girl. It was an ordinary shout from someone to come. It was a scream for help. I stood perfectly still. My first reaction was to run. Then I thought that maybe it was Martha. I headed for the scream. Suddenly I heard a man laugh brutally. I stepped up to the passage that led to the next loft. In the dim light beyond the wall I saw a large man with a big sack on his back dragging a girl by his arm. I strained to get a glimpse of her. I couldn't make out her face, but I recognized the polka-dot dress. Without thinking, I drew the pistol, cocked it, and released the safety catch. The man heard the click, spun around. "Leave her alone," I said in the deepest voice I could make, and I fired. The shot scared the pants off me. The bullet hit a wall and I heard plaster fly in all directions. There was a strange smell, too. It must have been the gunpowder that Father had told me about. For the first time since I'd set my eyes on the gun, I realized that it was a really good shot. I guess I'd never quite believed in it until then. It certainly had an effect. The big oaf let go of the girl, threw down his sack, and ran for dear life. If I hadn't been so frightened by the shot, I wouldn't have burst out laughing. Martha was too scared to move. I was sure she would have run away, too, if she could have. I slipped through the passageway. "It's just me," I said. "The boy whose food you took, remember?" I took a step forward. She backed away as though I were a German. "You ate some sugar and your father tried to grab me, remember? I know your name's Martha." She stood still. "Who was that who shouted?" I couldn't manage to make my voice as deep as before. Still, it came out pretty low. "It was me." I thought I saw her smile. "And what was that big bang?" "It was just a rock I knocked against some tin," I explained. "It was like a real shot," she said shakily. "It even chipped off some of the wall." She pointed behind her. I said nothing. "What will happen if he comes back?" she said in a worried voice. "Where did you come from?" "From our hideout. I'm not supposed to leave it, but my parents went to look for more food and I thought I'd just come out for some air. It's so dark and stuffy in there." And then all of a sudden he came. "Come," I suggested. "Let's wait for your parents in your hideout." She didn't answer. Then she stepped close to me and whispered, "I'm not allowed to tell you where it is. My father would kill me." "All right," I said. "Let's go to the loft next door and hide there in a corner." What if my parents come back and don't find me? I was dying to talk to someone, even if I was only a girl, but I couldn't force her to stay, as much as I tried dragging it out. "How old are you?" "9. I thought you were only 8. "That's because I'm small." "How old are you?" 12. Actually, 11.5. "Where did you live before?" "In the ghetto." She told me where they had lived before the transports, and where they had lived before the war. And she told me about the dolls she used to have. She had only one of them left, plus another her father had found in an apartment. I told her about my mouse. That scared her. "You really touch it?" "Yes." "And it doesn't bite you or give you germs?" That made me laugh. I'd forgotten how scared some people were of mice. Like Oldborough. You know, human beings have been raising mice for 3,000 years. How do you know? It's in the encyclopedia. "I'd better get back to our hideout," she said at once. I nodded. "Where will you go from here?" "All the way to the rope factory. I have to get something from there." "Aren't you afraid?" "Sometimes." Before she left, she took a pin from her hair and gave it to me. I listened to her going down the stairs, and they went to look at my present in the light. I hadn't even told her my name.